We are just hours away from Miami versus Texas A&M, the game we've been waiting weeks for, and I'm just excited. I know my partner Liam Hickey's excited. Liam, so let's just get right into this action. I mean, we got Carson back versus Marcel Reed. So many storylines, but let's just get right into it.
So on Saturday, I mean, there's no question about it. Miami will play its biggest game in the last 23 years. I can't think of a game with more significance for Miami since they last played at Ohio State in the 2002 National Championship. So this is going to be a game with huge implications, not just for Miami, but for Mario Cristobal, really for everyone involved. And they'll be doing it when they travel to College Station for its first ever appearance in the college football playoff, facing a crowd of about 100,000 hostile fans in a stadium almost twice as large as Hard Rock Stadium, which is just crazy to fathom. And it'll be against an opponent that will feel like Miami is looking in a mirror. Both have quarterbacks that have had consistency concerns, but on their best day have been Heisman candidates. Both have elite pass catchers with one explosive, multi-positional, dynamic receiver that is the heartbeat of the offense and can change the game on a dime. Both have a dominant offensive front that is tremendous in pass blocking and preventing pressure to the QB, and both have a terrifying edge rusher or two that is tremendous in becoming an absolute game wrecker. So these are two teams that essentially have all the same strengths, which is why it will be must-watch TV on Saturday at noon Eastern, and it is already indisputably the marquee matchup of the first round of the college football playoff. There's no question about that either. Game day will be there, McAfee will be there, and all of your favorite college football personalities will be there as well. And while no one can decisively predict which team will come out on top, because really this is a 50-50 pick 'em, what everyone can agree on is that this game will feel like pure ecstasy. It will be pure cinema. And Zach, you're flying out to Kyle Field. You're going to be there in the stands. So, what are your thoughts going into Saturday? And are you feeling a little daunted by the fact that the ratio of Miami fans to Aggie fans will be about 3,500 to 100,000?
Well, first off, Liam, I was looking at the weather. The weather on Saturday looks great, but I'm back home in New York now. On Friday, it looks like it might rain. That's when I'm flying out. Fingers crossed that the flight doesn't get delayed. But hopefully I'll be at Kyle Field on Saturday, and that's obviously the goal. But yeah, I'm not feeling worried at all. I'm gonna wear that Hurricane Orange proud and maybe talk some trash to some Aggie fans as well, but stay safe, of course. But yeah, and I'm just thinking you said it best. They have really similar strengths. And I think this game could come down to either one mistake or one really exciting play. And I think that's really how it might encapsulate this game.
For sure. And if we set the stage here, right? A&M's coming into this game as a 3.5 point favorite. That line has moved a lot. It started off as 5.5 when the bracket was first announced, moved down to 4, and now they lost a half point because a lot of the bookies are favoring Miami now. I mean, this really is a 50-50 pick 'em because usually the home team gets about a 3 point advantage. So it really is only like a half point of margin in terms of quality of teams there. And Miami is obviously 10-2. A&M is 11-1 with their last loss in this coming on the last game of the regular season to their arch rivals in Texas with a ticket to Atlanta in the SEC championship game on the line. They obviously lost and it was not a good showing by them. So they're kind of on a losing streak right now. I haven't really been the best as of recently. Completely different story for Miami. And the last time the Hurricanes played at College Station was in 2022. That was with Tyler Van Dyke as signal caller, and they lost 17-9. I think things will be different this time around, though. So let's start with the quarterback matchup, which I think this game will likely come down to two things. One of which being which QB can make the least amount of mistakes and protect the ball the best. So when looking at these two quarterbacks, Marcel Reed versus Carson Beck, their styles could not be any more different, and yet they've had the same level of production essentially all season. Looking at Carson Beck, his touchdown to interception ratio 25 to 10, 75% completion rate in 3,072 pass yards. Now, Marcel Reed has the same touchdown interception ratio on the season, 25 to 10, has only about 100 less pass yards. And what's really significantly worse is he has a 62% completion percentage. But where his playmaking ability lies is in his ground game and his ability to be a mobile quarterback. He has 466 yards on the ground and averaging about 5.2 yards per carry. But however, looking over the last stretch of this season, over these last 6 games in particular, it's been two completely different stories. Marcel Reed has had 6 interceptions over the last 5 games, with multiple picks in 3 of those. He's had 18 turnover-worthy plays, which is eighth most in Power 4. 11 over the last 6 games in terms of turnover worthy plays. Becca's had three, by the way. And in terms of his accurate pass rate, only been throwing at about 52%, which is 15th worst among 141 QBs with 250 dropbacks. And so looking at his most recent loss when they fell 27 to 17 against Texas, not a great showing. He went 20 for 32 with only 180 yards, zero touchdowns, and two interceptions. He also ran the ball pretty well, though, 12 times for 71 yards. So in total, right, he's wildly inconsistent. We spoke with Alex Donald last week. Like he said, he's Mr. Roller Coaster, but his mobility is a real threat. And he's probably, in my opinion, the second most dangerous quarterback on the run in the entirety of college football. I'd maybe put Diego Pavia above him. But besides that, really, I mean, Miami will really have a difficult problem on their hands. But if there is a silver lining, it's the fact that Miami against mobile quarterbacks have been really good. They faced five this season, right? Byron Brown, DJ Lagway, Kevin Jennings, Thomas Castellanos, and Kyron Drones. Now, out of all those combined, they've only ran for 74 yards total. So that could really be a good strength where Miami can limit Marcel Reed, which is his best ability by far to be on the run. Like he can explode for really big plays out of nowhere. So Miami really has to limit that. And what's also interesting is that he's not really great at reading defenses in situational circumstances. So when he's kept clean in the pocket, 76 PFF grade. Under pressure, that drops to 48. And when he's not blitzed, that's about 56. However, remarkably, when he is blitzed, he's extremely well at 82 overall grade. So what that indicates is that Miami should probably stick with a four-man rush in this game, and like they've been doing all season, drop back with a seven-man coverage. Reed does not have great situational awareness, which is ironic because his last name is Reed, yet he can't read defenses really well. And also, his average time to throw is 2.96, which is a really, really long time. That's 94th out of 116 quarterbacks. And according to PFF, when he's taking that long to throw, over 2.5 seconds, he's completing only 52% of his passes, and he's making over 14 turnover worthy plays in those situations. So that's one side of the story, right? Carson Beck. 10 to 1 touchdown interception ratio over these last 4 games. 81% completion percentage in that span as well. He's been playing lights out, averaging about 300 pass yards per game as well. Granted, it has been against the best competition, but still, I think Marcel Reed played against Stanford. He played against some low-level opponents too, besides just Texas. And in terms of his average time to throw, 2.35, which is actually top 10 fastest in the nation. So he's a touchdown to interception ratio of 12 to 3 and only one turnover worthy play when he's getting the ball out at under 2.5 seconds to throw. So for better or for worse, this is another thing to consider. He's only pressured on 14.7% of dropbacks this season. That's by far the lowest rate in the country. The next closest is Trinidad Chambliss at Ole Miss with over 6 percentage points higher than that at over 20%. So I spoke earlier on the season how that could maybe be a detriment to him because he's really does not know how to deal with pressure being thrown at his face. And A&M has the eighth best pass rush in the country, and they lead the nation in sacks per game. So they will most likely get to Carson Beck. So that will kind of be a situation where we don't know what to expect. But his average time to throw could really help things there and get the ball out quickly. And if he's able to do that all season, he will certainly have success. So that's what I think. And when it really comes down to a situation of who would you rather prefer, just, 1,000-foot view, who would you rather have in a college football playoff, Marcel Reed or Carson Beck? I think it's pretty obvious to me. I mean, I want Carson Beck, the more experienced guy. He's been in the situation before with Georgia, has years of SEC experience under his belt. So that's who I would take. But who do you think, Zach, in this matchup? Like, what stands out to you?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go with Carson Beck too. Like you said, he has the experience, but I did find it interesting. He has not played Texas A&M in his career, and we know Carson Beck has been at Georgia, so he does have that SEC experience. But he's been in rowdy atmospheres with 80,000 plus fans, so I don't think that's really gonna get them. He's gonna, silence that noise. And I was watching his presser on Monday, I believe, and he came with a new haircut.
Yep.
He's got fully shaved head, buzz cut, and that's I feel like if somebody does that, they're dialed in. They're ready for
Yeah,
this
he's
game.
so locked.
But if you look at the last 3 to 5 games in the season, it seems like Carson Beck and Marcel Reed are on opposite sides of the spectrum, really. Carson Beck really flourishing in these last 3 games, making a statement because Miami, they had something to play for really throughout these past 3 to 5 games that they want to get to this college football playoff. And obviously they're in. Marcel Reed and Texas A&M, they were cruising, except when you look at that Texas game where things really sounded differently. And Russell Reed against Texas threw for 180 yards. That was tied for, I believe, his worst amount of yards this season besides Samford, where he didn't play the whole game because Texas A&M blew out Samford 48-0. But in this game, I'm really thinking Carson Beck's going to be a real leader and get this Hurricanes offense going. And if they want to win, they got to get that offense going early.
Yeah, A&M, some people have considered them frauds because they've only played the bottom half of SEC opponents all season. Then when they finally had a real test against Texas, they obviously did not live up to expectations. And for Miami, it's really been a playoff game ever since that loss to SMU. So for 5 straight games now, they've been playing like it's a playoff situation because it's really win or go home for them through that final stretch of the regular season. So they're kind of already in that mode. While, like you said, A&M, they were already in cruise control in that game against Texas. Didn't necessarily matter in terms of their postseason hopes. So let's get to the line of scrimmage matchup now because I said that there are two factors to deciding the outcome of this game. One of them is which quarterback can make less mistakes. The other one, I think, will be which unit on the line of scrimmage performs better because this game, it's going to be trench warfare. Two absolutely vicious units battling at each snap for the entirety of the game. I think this is possibly the biggest factor that will decide the outcome. And now, just setting the stage here, right? Miami is the only team in the country with the top five offensive line and defensive line. They had the number five ranked O line and then the number two ranked defensive front in the entire nation, only behind Texas Tech. So, looking right now at the offensive line for the Hurricanes against this defensive line for the Aggies, and I think sparks will fly here because Miami has the fourth best pass blocking grade. A&M, we referenced it before, eighth best pass rush. So the question is, can the Hurricanes keep Carson Beck in a clean pocket? He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country when they're able to do so. It opens up things for the run game. It opens up things for the pass game. So I think if they're able to stop Cassius Howell and company, it could really be a big success for Miami. Also, talking about that run blocking, they are 10th in the nation in that statistic as well. And that complements the Sonic and Knuckles tandem of Mark Fletcher and Gerard Pringle really well. And they should be able to thrive if this offensive line can set them up for success. And look on the other side of that now, right? This A&M run defense has been porous all season. 5.5 yards per carry they've been giving up to opposing running backs, which is sixth worst in the Power Four. And they've been averaging 3.9 yards after contact allowed, which is fourth worst in the entire country, which means that when that first time the running back is initially contacted, he's still able to get about 4 more yards after that first hit on the ground, which is not a good statistic at all. And we know how good Miami is at pushing the pile. For example, we saw that earlier in the season against Florida when they went on that game clinching drive in about the fourth quarter or so. It was a one-score margin, and they just went on this bruising drive, just kind of using Mark Fletcher and Marty Brown, got into the end zone, and the game was over. Just sticking it on the ground, milking the clock, and that's how they won that game. And if they can replicate that at Kyle Field, yeah, they should have no problem, in my opinion. So anything that sticks out to you there? Oh, and also one more thing, talking about player personnel. Francis Mauigoa versus Cassius Howell. If they're lined up next to each other, that's two first team APL Americans battling after each other, snap after snap. So that will be like a prime time matchup to watch out for there. But anything that you see from this offensive line or this defensive line from A&M?
I kind of just want to talk about the Miami offensive line. And I think they've been spectacular all season, but it's the run game that really has been inconsistent. And yet, Miami's offensive line is allowing the running backs like Mark Fletcher Jr., like Shamar Brown to get these holes. They're not being they're not being consistent, the running backs. But I think Mark Fletcher Jr., Chris Ball said he's looking good. He's healthy. He's been banged up a little bit. So if he could be on his A game, that allows Miami's offense to be two-dimensional, and that's something they need to do against A&M.
Yeah, so Mark Fletcher, he's kind of has that bowling ball style of play. He's actually 11th in the FBS in a 90 rushing grade. And if this matters in anything, I think the EA Sports college football game gave him like a 90 plus rating as one of the top running backs in trucking ability. So that just kind of shows his kind of play style right there. And Miami runs inside zone 78% of the time, which will work against A&M's vulnerable interior, especially at the second level, which is where they're weakest against in defending the run. So if Fletcher can get downhill like that time after time again, he's going to have a lot of success, and that will really complement Gerard Pringle, who has definitely been the catalyst for Miami's success down the stretch here. He's completely reinvented this offense by adding a new wrinkle to Dawson's schemes with his quickness and elusiveness, kind of added another dimension to how Miami operates as a whole. He has the most yards per carry on the team at 6.2 yards on the ground for each carry. He can explode for big gains. So, they're probably going to use Mark Fletcher as the feature back in this game, but then they can mix in Gerard Pringle here and there on those jet sweeps, on those end arounds, or just running it up the middle. And it will definitely throw a wrinkle to what A&M is expecting because they are two different guys entirely. And so that's something to watch out for too. But looking now at this defensive line for Miami versus this A&M offensive line, and I think this is also where you'll see a lot of fireworks because there's been a lot of drama pregame leading up to this matchup, especially with two players in particular. So we'll get to that. But looking all across the board on these units, all of them just have some certified specimens, right? A&M, not only do they have Trey Zune the third, but they have Demetrius Crownover, who's like 6'7", the tallest O lineman on the team, 336 pounds. They have Armaj Reed Adams, who is a second team AP All-American. And of course, they have Trey Zune, the infamous Trey Zune, who has a 96.9 pass blocking grade, 3 points higher, by the way, than any other offensive lineman in the country. So this guy is an absolute dog. Just won the SEC Jacobs blocking trophy, recognizing him as the best pass blocking guy in the entire Southeastern Conference. So, I mean, Ruben Bain will have a big test, but he poked the bear. So that's something to monitor as well. And then this defensive line, yes, they have Bain and Mesidor. Or go ahead, Zach, what are you saying there?
Oh yeah, they had some media availability for the defensive guys like Jacoby Thomas, Ruben Bain today, and Bain was asked about Trey Zune's comments, and he said, "God bless." So I started like getting fired up after that. It's gonna be a fun matchup to watch between them two.
Yeah, no, I think Ruben Bain handled that interview with class, but he's definitely writing his name down on that notebook pregame. I'll tell you that. So that's gonna
Yeah.
be fun to watch. But so you have Bain, but you also have Akeem Messid on the other side, and that's where I think A&M could struggle. I mean, their right side of the offense, they're really great in their run game, running it up through that right side through the A gap. They have an 86 run grade in total, averaging over 6 yards per carry when they do so. But then compared to their left side, it's much more vulnerable. That drops down to about a 79 grade at about 4.7 yards per carry. Still pretty good, but there is a significant decrease between those two sides. So whichever one Mesidor's line up against, he might eat as well. And not just that, but you have guys in the interior as well. I mean, David Blaze healthy again, Ahmad Moten, five-star Justin Scott, Armando Blunt. I mean, there's guys all over for Miami. So that will definitely be something to watch for. And the key will be getting home to Reed with just that four-man rush, which they've been able to do all season. They have the sixth highest pressure rate when not blitzing quarterbacks. So I think they'll be able to get it done. And it'll be something to watch as well. So, what else do you think about anything on this defensive line or this offensive line for A&M?
Well, I kind of want to talk about the Miami defensive line a little bit from what I was
Yeah.
hearing about today when those defensive guys were talking, and all like the media attention is all around Maui Noah, or excuse me, Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, but you also have to preach to those interior guys as well who may not get that love from the media. But you've seen over the past few games what Ahmad Bowden's been doing, and in that interior side of the defensive line, he's going to be really critical against this Texas A&M offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so deep for Miami too. They have depth. You'll never see a Miami team getting bullied with Mario Cristobal coaching. I mean, he's a former offensive lineman himself. That's where he structures this team around. That's how this team can make a deep run in the playoffs because good teams win at the line of scrimmage and good teams will not get bullied off that center. So that's how you can really control games, control the tempo of games by establishing that run game through opening up things in the middle and the interior with your O-line guys. And so we talked about the Miami running game a little bit with Mark Fletcher and Gerard Pringle. But let's talk about this A&M run game because it kind of hangs in the balance a little bit, in my opinion, on if they get a certain guy back or if not. Because right now, they have Marcel Reed and Ruben Owens as their primary runners. We talked about Marcel Reed averaging 5.2 yards per carry. Ruben Owens, 5.5 yards per carry. A very good back, very solid. They're the current biggest threats. But Miami could have a real problem if Le'Veon Moss for A&M returns because he apparently, from what I've been hearing, could be a top 10 back in the country when he's fully healthy. Problem is, he's not. He has been dealing with a left ankle injury since October 11th when he injured it against Florida. And Mike Elko, in his Monday press conference, said he's in wait and see mode, which indicates to me that he may not be fully ready for that Saturday game, or at least if he is, probably on a limited snap count, a limited snap share. And actually, he was seen practicing yesterday in a limited capacity as well. And it was just announced today that he will be likely questionable for the game, which, as we know, probably means he's a game time decision because questionable, unlike the NFL, for at least Miami purposes, it means doubtful. I'm not sure how they run things over at the Aggies, but questionable does not mean for certainty that he will play. So we'll see, and we'll monitor that situation because that could be a real headache in the backfield and in the front for Miami if Le'Veon Moss returns and adds another wrinkle to that offense. But who knows? I mean, this could all be a total smokescreen by Elko. He may be injured completely. He may be fully healthy. This could just be something that they're trying to confuse Miami on. So who knows?
Yeah, sometimes coaches got to play games, but regardless, they're a top 25 rushing offense in the country. That's something, Miami has to look out for. That defensive line has to stop immediately so they don't get those extra yards. But, you got Jacoby Thomas back there, Zachariah Poyser to stop them if the running back does get that far. But Reed, since Le'Veon Moss has been hurt, has been that second rushing guy, if you will. He's 466 yards, which is second on the team. 0 618 as a redshirt, both redshirt sophomores. So I think you'll be able to limit the running game if you have success stopping Reed from running the football.
Yeah, and also, right? I mean, Keontae Scott could be a big help for Miami if they get him back. Mario
Hmm.
Cristobal, in his Monday presser, said that he feels strongly about his outlook. Once again, you never know, right? Believing Mario Cristobal and everything he says when it comes to injury news has been a fool's errand all season. So, I mean, that's always notoriously cryptic on Miami's end. You can never really tell until you really see him in pads on the day of the game. So we'll see what happens there. And that will segue us into the last positional group we'll talk about, and that's the passing game and the secondary. Probably the more glamorous part of this whole discussion, right? So Miami, when you have a baby Jesus on your team, you're going to center your entire offense around him, and that's what they've been doing. He leads the Power Four in yards after the catch. He has garnered all sorts of accolades over the past couple weeks. PFF First Team All American, CBS True Freshman of the Year, ACC First Team, ACC Rookie of the Year, and Second Team AP All American. He has a record breaking 106 targets without a drop, which is ridiculous. Has the second most amount of missed tackles forced, and he really is just kind of that kitchen sink guy. Sorry, my dog is barking. For Miami, he can play in the slot. He can play in the backfield on end arounds, on jet sweeps. He can be a true receiver, obviously, in those jump off situations. I mean, he's 5'11 and he's still getting it done. And obviously, he's really good on punt returns. And of course, he can also be a gunslinger as well. I mean, we saw him making that absolute dot to JoJo Trader in that NC State game. So he can really do a little bit of everything. But where he's really the best at is in the slot. He's second in slot receiving grade, and he's probably one of the best wide receivers in the country on those screen passes. Now, however, A&M may have a counterpunch to this because they are averaging the seventh fewest yards per attempt allowed to slot receivers and are giving up the fewest yards per attempt allowed on screen passes, averaging only about 2.4 yards given up. So it's kind of, once again, they've never faced a Malachi Tony before. It's one of those situations where it's a movable force versus unstoppable object. So we'll see what happens when these two forces clash. But I mean, Malachi Tony, he's done it all season. He's truly a one of a kind player. So I could see him getting it done against A&M, but if he's not, he could also be used as a decoy and really shed more light on these guys like CJ Daniels, Keelan Marion, JoJo Trader, Joshua Moore. Maybe they could get more passes there to really kind of misdirect and mislead this A&M defense. And they've also held wide receiver once to under 40 reception yards in total over 6 games. So we'll see what happens. But are you seeing any takeaways for this Miami receiving core?
Well, I think when Miami's been at its best, the Shannon Dawson has had the playbook open. Just because you're playing a really good defense does not mean to close the playbook. Because if you close the playbook, that's like standard stuff, standard I don't, like things that the defense has seen throughout the year. You got to keep it open because Miami, I think they're special when it comes to their wide receiver groups, and I think it's something. If Shannon Dawson has that open playbook, it's something Texas A&M's defense hasn't seen all year. And like you said, Liam. Maybe it's not Malachi Tony going for 100 passing yards. Maybe it's him, being used as decoy. But you've seen over the past 3 games, guys stepping up like Keelan Marion, even the tight end side of it too, and Alex Baum and Elijah Lofton, those guys getting involved. So you got, what, like at least 5 or 6 guys you could throw the football to, and you're confident. I think that's important for Shannon Dawson to realize and utilize it in this big game.
And I think that's what national media outlets and other pundits are failing to see, that this wide receiver core is deep. It's not just Malachi Tony. I mean, obviously it can just be him, but they've used other guys all season, and it kind of really complements Tony's role. And so A&M, they are kind of being touted as the group with the more diverse receiving core overall, with more depth. And that may be true. I mean, we'll talk about their guys right now. They have a guy who's basically the more mature version of Malachi Tony and Casey Concepcion. He's a Paul Hornung Award winner, recognizing him as the most versatile player in the entire country. He's a first team AP All American, the only other All American besides Cassius Howell for the first team. So overall, besides just Casey Concepcion, though, who's a transfer from NC State, so Miami is familiar with him, they also have Mario Craver, a transfer from Mississippi State. Now, these two guys have been maybe the best wide receiver combos in the entire country this season. And Craver offers elite speed down the seams, and he's a guy that could definitely be a deep threat target. They also have Ashton Bethel Roman. They have guys all over the field that can make plays. And that could be a problem for Miami, but like we mentioned, they're probably going to be getting Keontae Scott back. He's got experience playing at the SEC level. He's a transfer from Auburn. They also have Jacoby Thomas, who I'm really high on as a safety. Bryce Fitzgerald, true freshman that leads Miami in interceptions. I mean, they have Zechariah Poyser, Xavier Lucas. This secondary is so much better than last season to the point where I think that they could really compete with this A&M group. But we'll see what happens, and it all has to be left out on the field.
And I also want to mention that Jacoby Thomas does have that college football playoff experience last year, and I know these guys in this Concepcion and Craver, they're all about they're very fast, very elusive, just like some of the defensive guys on Texas A&M as well. And I think that you have these guys, you have them going up against Keontae Scott and guys like Zachariah Poyser, like you mentioned. I think that matchup's really going to be fascinating in this game, and it's something I'm really excited to watch.
And Jacoby Thomas is a transfer from Tennessee. He got whooped actually in his
Yeah,
only
yeah.
college football playoff experience last year against Ohio State. But I'm assuming this will be way different. And Miami will be rewarded if they can beat A&M. They'll play in non-hostile environments probably the rest of the way in neutral sites. And all of their games, by the way, will be in warm weather. So the conditions will not be a factor besides obviously the fan elements in this first game because they're playing in Texas for the first two rounds. Then they'll travel to Arizona if they make it that far. And then the final will, of course, be in Miami's own backyard in Hard Rock Stadium. So that's at least a good positive takeaway from there.
And Liam, you speak about the warm weather. It's been 30. I know you're in Chicago. It's been 30 degrees in New York all week. I am so excited to get to Texas where it's gonna be 70 degrees at 11 a.m. on Saturday. That weather's gonna be amazing.
I wish I could join you, but the flights were too expensive. I mean, the tickets are, expensive themselves, but the flights were like $2,000, getting down there. So I
That's
couldn't do it.
crazy. Yeah.
So let's get over into just some last notable stats and factors going into this game beyond the positional matchups. I think turnovers could be a big thing. In Miami right now, 12th in the nation with a +9 turnover margin. A&M tied for 111th in the country with a -7 margin on the season. So this is obviously something that Miami could capitalize on. Take away a few possessions down the stretch for A&M, win that time of possession battle, and that's where you can see them unlocking the victory to this game. And also, besides turnovers,
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, go. You're good. You're good.
I was just saying, so besides turnovers, which is obviously really important, we emphasize that for Miami every game. That's like one of the keys to the game. Penalties, another big thing. And we know this has been a recurring issue for Miami all season, and this could potentially be a season jeopardizing problem if it's not fixed. But remarkably, A&M is one of the very few teams in the country that is somehow worse than Miami in this category. So Miami right now, 108th in the country. A&M tied for 117th in this category in penalty yardage per game. So obviously, I still think Miami will have a tougher time in the away environment, especially with those pre-snap penalties, those false starts. They really have to be disciplined in this game. But hopefully, if they can limit those, I mean, A&M might have their own difficulties as well. So, I mean, they each played the same amount of home games all season, and those are the results. So, I mean, I think they're also just fundamentally bad at those turnovers, or at those penalties, rather.
Miami has been a little bit better with the penalties at home rather than on the road, which you look at
Yeah.
SMU, 12 penalties, six of them were before the snap. And that kind of goes into the hostile atmosphere. Can these guys communicate on the offensive line, everybody in that offense to avoid, or even on the defensive side of the ball with defensive pre-snap, neutral zone infractions, whatever you want to do it? I think that could be a major factor in this game. Is these penalty yards, getting the team down the field with unexcusable, unearned yards could make a could play a big difference in the game.
However, Miami was way better than Pitt in their last game of the season, and that was on the road. That was probably a big reason why they won that game by such a large margin. So if you're talking about just recent events right now, Miami is really trending upwards in their momentum. So, but that you did bring up a great point, and that is what people are right now saying will be the biggest factor in determining this game. Not sure if that's true yet, but it is Kyle Field itself. It is the largest away stadium Miami has played in all season. Their current capacity of away games that they played in, Doak Campbell was the largest. That seated 67,000 people. A&M seats about 103,000. And 3,000 of those tickets will go to Miami fans. So 100,000 hostile fans jeering at you all game. That will play a big factor. But when you have a player like Carson Beck on your team that has been through that environment before, played in some of the biggest stadiums in the country, and has got proven experience, that could really be a beneficial factor compared to their last time out with a guy like Tyler Van Dyke, who's back up to Kevin Jennings at SMU, who didn't make the playoffs. So something to consider. Kyle Field is 80% larger than Hard Rock. Hard Rock has a 65,000 capacity. But also, if we're talking just about these throwaway stats that may not be important, but they're interesting, A&M right now is 1 in 10 all time on game day visits, and they will be visiting for this game because, like I said, by far best matchup in the first round of the college football playoff. You're going to have some blowouts in Oregon and JMU most likely, also Ole Miss and Tulane. But game day will be there, and that has historically not been good for A&M. And then also, though, if you want to spin it in the negative direction for Miami, no road team has won so far in the history of the 12-team college football playoff. So just pointing that out there as well. So, I mean, two kind of clashing statistics there, but two to consider.
It is definitely going to be the best matchup of Saturday, in my opinion, because the rest of them are a group of five versus a power four matchup. But and it kind of thinks, why did they schedule this game for prime time in Caulfield? I know some people were saying that, but regardless, Caulfield's going to be bumping. And even I heard that they're talking about breaking the attendance record on Saturday. We'll see about that. How many people can you squeeze in the standing room only if that'll come into effect? But yeah.
I wish you the best, and I hope that you don't get jeered or, chanted badly by the A&M fans. And the 12th man, is always notoriously, I think they're pretty welcoming and hospitable to opposing away fans. So hopefully that goes well for you. They obviously have that non-traditional midnight yell thing that they do before games. I'm not sure if you'll be at College Station for that or not, but that's kind of iffy, but we'll respect it because it's an opposing university and they have their own traditions and conventions. So not don't want to speak too ill of that. But let's get into these predictions to end off the show. Zach, you go first. Who do you think is going to win this game, and how much?
Well, I believe Texas A&M is favored right now, but I mean, I've said Miami all season. I can't not say Miami right now. I think it's going to be a really, really close game. Might come down to the final possession. I'll go. I think the defenses are going to, pull through. Let's say 23-20. That might be a crazy prediction, but I think it's going to be a three-score, three-point game. Miami wins 23-20.
Okay, we are very close in our predictions then because I have Miami winning 24 to 21. Kind of for the same reasons as you. I think Miami wins the line of scrimmage, and if they can do that, that kind of unlocks everything. They can very easily win the turnover battle with the margin that A&M has on the season. They can take away a few possessions. Beck plays unfazed in this big game atmosphere like he has before. They beat A&M on the ground. Le'Veon Moss is, in a limited capacity if he even does play at all. And they consistently get into those second and manageable situations, which is where they thrive. You don't want to get into those third and longs, but if you can get, 4 yards consistently on every play, you're going to be in good shape. And I think Miami will be able to do that. I don't think just like the cold weather, that was a big storyline against Pitt. That never really was a big issue. I'm not sure if this hostile crowd atmosphere will be a big issue if Miami can get in front early, and that will really silence that crowd. So that's what I have right now. And Zach, I think we have a pretty big interview coming up, don't we?
Yeah, well, we talked to Gaby Urrutia with 247 Sports coming up next, so stay tuned to that. It's going to be a good one. Welcome back to the TMH Sportscast. We're here with Gaby Urrutia from 247 Sports. Gaby, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me, man. Excited about this conversation.
Absolutely. So, two things we want to talk about today. Obviously, Texas A&M preview, Miami's biggest game in the last 23 years. Then, of course, kind of an outlook on the transfer portal situation Miami will be confronting for 2026 as well. But starting with Saturday's matchup, take a deep dive into each team's strengths statistically. It seems like this game will be determined by who wins at the line of scrimmage and which QB can better protect the ball and force less turnovers. So, out of
Yeah.
these two factors, In your opinion, which will be most important for Miami? Will it be that Marcel Reed versus Carson Beck matchup, or will it be more so determined by Miami's matchups in the trenches?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of both, right? Like, you bring up good points. The quarterback matchup is going to be huge. Both quarterbacks have been at times, Carson's been better with it, but, turnover prone, especially if you kind of dig into his past. Marcel Reed has 10 interceptions on the year as well, and he's someone that in recent games has kind of turned the ball over in some key situations. So that's going to be a huge factor, the turnover battle. And Texas A&M doesn't really have a big playmaking type of defense, at least on the back end. They only have 3 interceptions on the season, so that's definitely something to consider. And then, when you play a lot of these big games against these big brands and these top end talent acquisition schools, the line of scrimmage always comes into play, right? And Texas A&M is built as strongly as anybody in the country up front. You look at that offensive line with Trey Zone across the board. They got a ton of dudes that have the same size that Miami has, as far as just again, it has to look a certain way, right? And when you look at the top tier teams in the country, that's how they're built. And Texas A&M definitely represents that on both sides of the line of scrimmage, right? They got a bunch of big interior defensive linemen. You got Albert Regis is a 315-pounder. You got DJ Hicks, a former five-star who plays awesome in a rotational role. Cassius Howell coming off the edge, who's probably the best pass rusher in the SEC. So trench play is going to be massive. And thankfully for Miami, this isn't a disadvantage, right? You come up against a top 10 ranked SEC team, and against an ACC team. Usually that would be the big difference maker. But the way Mario Cristobal has constructed this roster, it's a strength for this team and for this roster, the way that they're built. And so I think it's going to be a really interesting back and forth there. And I think whoever wins that battle in the trenches is going to dictate the flow of the game. When it comes to short yardage, right? You got to convert a third and short, or you got to move the ball. Who's getting after the quarterback? Who's generating the pressure? So trench warfare and quarterback play are two massive keys in this game. So that's going to be where my eyes are going to be. Watching this up in the press box at Kyle Field, excited about that.
Yeah, and Marcel Reed has not been great in read coverage situations, and so it seems
Mhm.
that because of that, Miami will stick with 7 men drop back in coverage, and then they'll stick with that 4 man rush, which has been pretty dynamic all season. Do you think that they'll have success against Trey Zune, Armaj, Reed Adams, those kind of guys, Demetrius Crownover, with just Bay and Messidor and your average 4 guys in the also in the interior as well, rushing Marcel Reed? Do you think they'll have overall success doing that?
I do. That's a really good point because that's basically how Texas played Texas A&M, right? They kind of dropped into a zone, and you force Marcel Reed to kind of process and have to deliver good balls into tight windows. And when he makes those throws, you tip your cap, but you can see how there's also times where it can kind of force him into some situations where he puts the ball in some dangerous spots, and it's on Miami to capitalize on those mistakes when they happen and be playmakers on the back end. So, look, Miami has two of the best edge rushers in the country, right? Between Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor. I mean, both those guys have been elite at generating quarterback pressures. Messidor has been more productive from a sack standpoint. So, you got, again, Trey Zune on one side, Demetrius Crownover on the other side. Both those guys are going to, Bain and Messidor are going to switch over and have their fair share of bouts with each one of those guys. But look, I like those guys over anyone in the country. And you watch the way South Carolina played against some premier edge rushers. Like, you turn on the South Carolina tape and Dylan Stewart and what he's able to do in some of those matchups where there is back and forth, where Zun sometimes, stonewalls him. There's other times that Dylan Stewart's able to generate pressure. I mean, I think there's going to be plenty of back and forth, but Miami, I think, has two pass rushers as capable as anyone in the country to disrupt those guys and make things difficult on them. And then the interior guys who can generate pressure as well, like Ahmad Moten has been an awesome pass rushing interior defensive lineman. Armando Blunt has been problematic as an interior pass rusher too. So I think that there's a lot that Miami brings to the table that can make life difficult for Marcel Reed in that front. And you mix in David Blay, who they're going to get back, and Miami's going to be at full strength. And I think that that's the right approach. You got to be able to get home with your front four, and you got to kind of play that zone and make that sort of cat and mouse game and try to make Marcel Reed make really, really good, timely, on point throws into tight windows. So yeah, I mean, I agree that that's the way they got to play this thing.
And now shifting gears now, who holds the advantage in the run game, and how would Le'Veon Moss's potential return impact things for Miami?
Yeah, Le'Veon Moss is a good player. He's got like, close to, 1,800 career rushing yards. So he's a vet and he was doing a good job for them until he got injured in that Florida game. And look, I think it's like an ankle. The lower body stuff is tricky again, especially in a big physical game like this. But the style that Texas A&M sort of runs, I think Marcel Reed obviously contributes to that. So I think if we're talking like pure handoff running, I honestly think it's not. I don't think there's much of a gap, right? Miami hasn't been super overly explosive, but they've been running the ball well. Over the past few weeks with the emergence of Gerard Pringle, who gives them a little bit more explosiveness. He has great vision and great patience. Mark Fletcher, who gives you some of more like that power inside the tackles type of running, but can also, make stuff happen and be physical with it. But I feel like that Texas A&M rushing attack, they're talented guys. Ruben Owens was a former five-star prospect. Like they got dudes, but I feel like their style of running kind of plays well into what Miami's strength is. Miami's one of the best run-stopping defenses in the country. You see what they did with Jeremiah Love, right? Held him to 33 yards. Jaden Ball comes down to Miami. He runs for 46 yards. Even Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love's counterpart, had one of his lowest season outputs against Miami. Hollywood Smothers, who had just run for like 200 yards against Georgia Tech or something like that, something crazy, comes back and plays Miami, and those guys couldn't run the ball at all. He had like -2 rushing yards, and he had a great season statistically. So I think a lot of those guys, I think Miami, the Texas A&M style of running plays well into what Miami does well. Then the Marcel Reed thing is dicey because, his ability to scramble and be a true dual threat. He's twitchy, man, and he's sudden, and he can kind of make you miss. He's slippery. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Miami can kind of turn those pressures into sacks because he can be elusive in the pocket. And that's going to be a big key to it. But I mean, I know statistically Texas A&M has like the better rushing offense. But when it comes to just true kind of handoff type of stuff, honestly, I like Miami's group maybe a little bit more just because of what Gerard Pringle brings to the table.
For sure, and A&M's rush defense has been kind of porous this season. They've been one of the worst teams
Yep.
in yards after contact allowed. So there are some vulnerabilities where Miami can exploit there. And you mentioned Jeremiah Love. It seems like he's got some sour grapes now because of that game, taking to social media
Yeah.
and supporting the Aggies, which is kind of weird. Um,
Yeah, that was an interesting tactic. I hope that's real. I don't know if it's real. I had some people commenting saying that wasn't real, so maybe it isn't. I don't
yeah.
know. If it is, if it's real, then whatever. But anyways, yeah, I think that's definitely an area where Miami can kind of get him right, and that's where look, Texas wasn't a great rushing team. Like all year, the knock on Texas was they couldn't really run the ball. They hadn't had a 100-yard rusher all season until they played Texas A&M in that season finale. Trey Wisner breaks off for 155 yards or so. I think Texas runs for almost 220 yards on Texas A&M. And so I think that this is a great opportunity for Miami. They're pretty weak tackling like or along the perimeter, like their cornerbacks. If they have to kind of get physical in the run game, I think, those cornerbacks to me aren't super physical from that standpoint. And I think that they can, if you kind of run at those guys, I think that can put them in a bind. They're like really aggressive on defense too. So sometimes you can kind of bite them with that. Like you can kind of use that aggressiveness against them and kind of pop some runs if you have some patience, some vision to do that, which, that's what Gerard Pringle's really good at, right? So I think that he could be an interesting. I'm curious to see how he performs, and so yeah, I think that this Texas A&M run defense is pretty suspect. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, I think, had like 160 yards combined. Arkansas ran for like 270 on them. Even South Carolina in that big first half they had that they put up 30 points. They ran the ball quite well against Texas A&M. So I am really curious to see how this running game works because I think that's an area where Miami can kind of control it and again get into some favorable third downs. This third down defense is elite, on paper of Texas A&M. So I think getting into some of those favorable down and distances is massive, and that's why running the ball well is important.
And A&M seems to have more depth now, switching gears, talking about the passing game, maybe the more
Yeah.
glamorous spot of this game, right? They had it seems like they have the more diverse group of talented pass catchers, not only with Casey Concepcion, who seems to be like a more mature version of Malachi Tony, but also
Hmm.
with Mario Craver, who offers elite speed, Ashton Bethel Roman as well. They just have a plethora of guys. Whereas Miami, their kind of whole offensive attack through the air seems to seemingly like evolve just around Malachi Tony. So for this
Right.
reason, do you think Miami will have more trouble in this area than the Aggies? And also, would the return of Keontae Scott potentially, maybe potentially change that?
Yeah, that's interesting too, right? Miami's past game, Malachi Tony's obviously the team's leading receiver. I think Miami's gotten some pretty good output from guys like Keelan Murray, and again, they're not maybe not stuffing the stat sheet the way that Malachi Tony is. You also remember getting C.J. Daniels back, fully back. He missed a couple games there on the back end of the season, so I think Miami's has got some guys. And again, I think this, talked about it, earlier today on our podcast, but like this secondary for Texas A&M is pretty gettable in my opinion. Will Lee has been suspect. He's given up over 500 yards through the air and 4 touchdowns. So he like teams have kind of attacked him. I think Miami could definitely attack him. David brought up this point a couple years ago when Miami put up 48 points against Texas A&M in 2023. Tyreek Chappelle, who's currently Texas A&M's nickel corner, he allowed 3 touchdowns in that game. So he's going to be the guy tasked with covering Malachi Tony. So I think that that's a matchup where Shannon Dawson a couple years ago already kind of picked on him, and I think it's going to be interesting to see if Shannon Dawson goes right back at him, kind of sees if they're actually equipped to cover Malachi Tony, because that's a whole different issue. You could know he's the best player. Being able to cover him is a totally different issue. And depending on how much you have to commit to him, you're also putting your other corners who have been a little bit suspect throughout the year in tight spots and have to kind of put them potentially on islands to go make plays. And I think C.J. Daniels has proven to be a pretty good contested catch guy. Keelan Marion has proven to be a steady, reliable, like move the chains types of receiver. So I actually think if Miami can block it up, which is a big part of the passing game, right, is protecting the quarterback. Carson Beck making quick decisions and getting rid of the ball, which he's elite at. He has like number 6 in the country as far as just quickest time to throw. I think it's like 2.35 seconds that he gets rid of the football on average, which is insane. So if Miami can kind of neutralize that Cassius Howell pass rush and they can kind of get into a rhythm, I think this Texas A&M secondary can might have a tough time. They haven't played a lot of pass offenses as good as Miami's. You see a lot of these teams that they've played, and it's Auburn, it's Florida, right? It's the bottom tier of the SEC, Arkansas, who's ran all over them really. A bunch of these Kentucky, whatever it is. So I think that Miami presents a unique challenge. On the Texas A&M side, I am a big Casey Concepcion guy. I was pounding the table for Miami to do what they needed to do to get him when he was in the portal last offseason. He's a dynamic, electric playmaker who's super slippery. And Mario Craver too. He kind of slowed down in SEC play. I think he averaged less than 50 yards per game in SEC play. But you turn on that Notre Dame tape, and he was a huge reason why Texas A&M beat Notre Dame, because he made some really big time plays, and it came after the catch, breaking tackles, and some of those Notre Dame secondary just not being physical enough with him, allowing him to kind of keep going and make those explosive plays after the catch. So both those guys are top 25 in the country in terms of yards after catch. So it's going to be essential to, when those guys get the ball in their hands, you got to get them on the ground. You can't let them run with it. You can't miss tackles. You can't be soft with them because they're not the biggest dudes like you mentioned. Like, they're kind of small, right? Casey Concepcion's maybe generously 5'10". He's probably 180 pounds or so. Mario Craver's probably a little bit smaller than that, or leaner than that. Ashel Bethel Roman is like their biggest guy, and he's 6 foot, 185 pounds. So it's an explosive, big play group, but on a down to down basis, you got to make these guys march down the field on you. And so, look, I think it's a unique challenge, but I think it's going to be all about, forcing Marcel Reed to find these guys and make those throws. So again, it comes down to the pass rush and how effective you are at disrupting and impacting the quarterback.
Yeah, and it seems like the national media consensus is that, A&M's group is way more deep, but I would beg to differ. I mean, CJ Daniels, Keelan
I agree.
Marion, they're guys that I feel like offer so much in terms of the passing attack for Miami. And unfortunately, though, they won't be around for next year. And so looking outward now to the 2026 season,
Yep.
Miami will obviously not only be just without them, Daniels, Keelan Marion, and some other guys, but also without Carson Beck. And so they'll likely jump into the transfer portal to find their next signal caller. And the QB market has been very active as of late,
Right.
especially over the last week. So talking about maybe some wish list guys for this Miami roster for next year, some predictions. It seems like there are 5 guys at the moment that have kind of jumped out, right? Sam Levitt, Brendan Sorsby, Dylan Raiola, Drew Messamaker, and DJ Lagway seem to be the leading guys of the pack right now. And out of these names, it seems like the two Big 12 quarterbacks in Sam Levitt and Brendan Sorsby have kind of separated themselves as the two leaders of this kind of QB group. So, in your opinion, why do you think that is? And do you think that you would take these two over any others? Or is there another candidate that you would prefer for Miami?
Yeah, I mean the quarterback options are interesting this cycle for sure. And I to me Brendan Sorsby makes a lot of sense for Miami just because he is a guy who can extend plays, right? He's a guy who can move the pocket. I think again when you kind of you put him in opportunities where he can get rid of the ball quickly, he's impactful and he's effective. So I've liked Brendan Sorsby for quite a bit now, and I think that he would be an interesting fit. Sam Levitt is just a juice guy to me, right? Like to me, he's just like a kind of got like a kind of like a borderline cocky chip on your shoulder type of guy. I think that resonates well in a locker room as far as just someone that you're going to want to play hard for. He's talented too. He brings something different to the table with his legs. And he's banged up though. So, the Sam Levitt thing is you're going to go another spring without a quarterback, kind of doing that back to back, with Carson Beck obviously missing some time with his off-season arm injury. So yeah, I think those are two great options. I mean, Drew Mestamaker to me is really intriguing just because he kind of comes from that Eric Morris air raid sort of background, and I think that that would blend well with Shannon Dawson, who's, this passing game is based off of air raid principles. Get the ball out quick, have kind of go through your progressions and rip it. It's not like he's like Dawson's not like he talks about it a lot. Like he doesn't drop plays for guys. Like the ball goes where it goes. Like, the play kind of dictates or the defense dictates where the ball goes. You're not like keying in on someone. And Mestamaker's in that style of offense. And like the last Eric Morris disciple to play under Shannon Dawson was Cam Ward, who went on to be the first overall pick, of course, by the Tennessee Titans last draft. So I think that that could be a potential long-term answer, which would provide some relief because we're having this conversation every offseason now, right? And that's difficult as far as just projecting your roster. And it is what it is in this era. Like again, Coach Cristobal talks about it all the time. These are one-year teams, and you got to go back to the drawing board and figure this stuff out. But to me, Raiola doesn't really do it for me. Lagway definitely doesn't really do it for me. So I'm not a huge advocate for either one of those options. But I think the other three that you mentioned, Liam, I think each of them brings something unique to the table that would help Miami I think each of them would be good fits for different reasons.
It seems like over the past few years, Miami has gone to a transfer quarterback for like pretty much on a 1-year contract in
Right.
this day and age of college football. But now you have Darion Coleman coming in
Hmm.
who could, and we haven't really seen Miami develop a quarterback. Do you think this
Right.
is the guy they sit down and they develop and he could possibly start in uh, a year or two, 2, 3 years, whatever season, and be the answer for Miami and for I guess for multiple seasons? And what's your evaluation of him and how can he develop as a quarterback?
Yeah, I think Darion Coleman's interesting. I think that there's a lot to love about just like the natural arm talent of Darion Coleman. Like you watch him, I mean, watched him throw a ton at this point between, if it was it was, the first time I watched him throw was like well, not this summer, not summer, like I guess 3 summers ago at UM, and like this kid has obvious arm twitch, right? Like he can rip it, and it's unique. He has unique arm talent. I think where he needs to I think the hardest thing to project is how his body's going to develop. And I think that that's my one reservation with Darion Coleman. I'm not concerned about the mentality. He's wired the right way. He's kind of like when I mentioned about like Sam Levitt, like just alpha, chip on your shoulder, gonna do what you got to do. Like he's a guy that people would love playing for. Like he's that type of dude. But at the end of the day, we're talking about these trenches, right? We're talking about 6'5", 245 pound Cassius Howell, rushing off the edge and hitting you, right? Like, how are you going to withstand getting hit by a 22-year-old like NFL bound defensive end? And the reality is, I think that right now, which is fine, Darion Coleman is just a little bit slight. And I think the way his body projects or the way his body develops will tell me if he's the guy. It's not so much about the talent. It's not so much about the mentality. Like, I think he's extremely talented. But he's like, if he's 165 pounds right now, think about a guy like Kevin Jennings, right? Like, that's my comp for Darion Coleman is Kevin Jennings. Like, I think best case I think he could be a Kevin Jennings type of quarterback. Kevin Jennings is 190 pounds, and you watch Kevin Jennings play against Miami. He looks skinny, right? Like he looks lean. So I think Darion Coleman's got to put on like 25 pounds before we have a conversation about like, hey, is this the guy for the future? But I think he's ultra talented. I definitely think he's someone that could be developed at Miami to be multi-year starter type. And look, these guys' bodies change a lot when they get into college and they're in these strength and conditioning programs. So I'm if he adds 20, 25 pounds, I'll be the first one raising my hand saying like we need to give this kid a shot to go play because he's different. But I think I don't know if I can. I'm not ready to have the Darion Coleman maybe conversation until this time next year, and to say, hey, like let's see where this thing's at. Let's reevaluate this thing after we've kind of seen him in this structure in this system for a whole year. Where's he at physically? Where's his body at? What's this looking like in practice against a good defense? This Miami team's good. He's going to get unique looks. So that's where I'm at with Darion Coleman. I think there's a chance that he can be the guy, but I think with all these quarterbacks, wait, you got to be in wait and see mode. The transition to college, especially for quarterback, is massive. So until we see it, it's hard to really know.
And reading the tea leaves right now, it seems that it will kind of open up into a competition in 2027 between not just Darion Coleman, but also maybe Luke Nickel or even Judd
Yeah.
Anderson for that spot. So that seems to be where the trajectory of Miami is headed. But for 2026 and the pieces around the signal caller for next year, it's are there any other players that Miami might be keen on or maybe worth monitoring outside of that quarterback position? I know you mentioned on social media Jace Brown from Kansas State may be a player, as well as Jake Crawford, who has worked with Zach Etheridge as a DB coach at Auburn.
Yep.
So any other players of that mold that you would think could fit Miami well?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're gonna look, Miami's gonna maximize any opportunity to acquire talent, right? Like that's the way that this organization is driven. That's the way Mario Cristobal is wired. So I also at the same time think that they've built this roster foundationally through high school recruiting well enough where look, this past offseason, they had to go get a ton of transfers because there were a ton of issues on defense. Like the depth wasn't there at some key spots. They had to go get depth guys. I think they feel good about just like the general roster at this point where you don't need to go reaching for multiple guys at one position because you're trying to just solve a problem. Like you're trying to figure out a problem. I think this roster, the foundation of it is pretty set. And now you can go get difference. Like you can go invest in maybe less higher quality type of transfers. And I think that's just like the general mentality from what I've gathered about this transfer this portal window. Like I think whoever they're going to get, whoever they key in on are going to be guys they believe are going to be like impact players who make the team better. And I think that that's the right approach. That's kind of like what, the Oregons and the Georgias and the Texases kind of do. The big time programs. It's like you're not recruiting depth really. Maybe quality depth on this, defensive line. That's a different story. But you're not recruiting guys because you don't got anything else. You're recruiting it to just make your roster better, or adding transfers to make your roster better. So I think that's where Miami's at. Look, it's going to be quarterback. It's going to be, maybe a big time receiver. Maybe another safety because Jacoby Thomas graduates. A linebacker with Wesley Bassint out of it. Potentially like an elite level pass rusher with Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor gone. Maybe they go invest in a premier edge rusher. I think that's very much on the wish list. So, got to see what becomes available. Of course, those guys you mentioned may or may not be options. Like Jay Crawford, I think there's just connection. I'm not sure if that's like an actual realistic thing. I would assume not just because of where they're at cornerback. Jace Brown is interesting, but he's played a lot of slot. So you got Malachi
Yeah.
Tony. So maybe he wants to go to a different situation where he can kind of be the guy. But look, if there's a big, outside receiver, in the mold of the guys that right? Let's say hypothetically, of course, like a Cam Coleman or a
Nick Marsh, maybe.
yeah, sure. Like someone like
Be a big one.
in that general mold that just is an obvious needle mover. Like those will be your indicators of like, hey, these are the guys. You'll know the names when you see them, right? Like, hey, this guy's obviously really good, and he's probably going to be expensive, and people want him. Like that's someone that you should consider. Like, hey, Miami might be in the market for a player like this. Like if it makes you say, whoa. That's the type of dude that I think Miami's trying to find in the transfer portal. So just to kind of give a broad strokes understanding of I think what the game plan is.
And the season isn't even over yet. And we've already
Right.
seen guys enter the transfer portal. Ray Joseph, Dalen Russ, and Nycar just announced a few. How many players do you think Miami can anticipate will leave the program after the season?
A lot. I think it's going to be quite a bit of churn. They sign a big high school recruiting class, 30 guys. These rosters are changing, right? They got to get down to 105 scholarship players. I think they're over that right now. When you could obviously guys will leave with graduation and guys will leave to the NFL and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it's fair to anticipate a decent amount of churn. I don't really know if I have like a number, like a specific number, but I wouldn't be surprised if like as far as transfer departures, I think expecting anywhere between like, you know, 10 and 15, I think is pretty fair. Depending, we've already seen three, so like seven more certainly doesn't seem out of the question. Um, Again, I don't. Miami does a good job of retaining guys, right? They haven't really lost any. I mean, Isaiah Horton might be the guy, and maybe Daryl Jackson are probably the two that like they probably didn't want to lose. Those are probably the only two transfers that it was just like, and Isaiah Horton they kind of let walk too. So I don't even want to really say that, but for the most part, they do a good job of retaining guys, the guys that they want to keep. They don't really get guys that they want that like they don't really let guys leave that they don't want to leave. They make sure it kind of gets done. So they take care of their people. So I don't know if I would anticipate anything quite like that just because of the way Miami's kind of structured and where things are at right now. You never know, I guess. As far as just guys that you could probably anticipate, that's about the range I would throw out there.
And a reason for this, like you said, it's because of this big roster overhaul. We're going to see Miami once again, for the fourth year in a row, the best ACC recruiting class. Can you just give a brief overview of any players of note that we can expect to see that could maybe make an immediate impact?
Yeah.
Jackson Campbell, for example, looks like he might be a plug and play for Maui Noah. Samorian Wingo looks like one of the most talented wide receivers in the
Mm.
country right now. Any players or positions that Miami like immensely upgraded in with this 2026 recruiting class?
Yeah, I really like this class, man. Again, it's like 30 people deep, and I think they did a really good job of acquiring a lot of just like really good quality football players. Jackson Cantwell is he's the headliner, right? Depending on who you ask. But just in general, Gatorade National Player of the Year, first ever offensive lineman to win the award. So he is a freak amongst freaks, genetic mutant, son of two Olympians, definitely a candidate to be a plug and play right tackle, which I think is a good point as far as just like potentially replacing Mauanoa. I think that's where he probably settles in at as far as just being maybe more of a right tackle. Depending on what this thing looks like, maybe a right guard early on in his career. But regardless, he's someone I would expect to make an immediate impact. You mentioned Samari and Wingo. CJ Daniels is graduating, right? And you need kind of someone that fills in that type of role. Samari and Wingo could potentially be that guy. I think someone that I think could potentially make an early impact is JJ Dunnigan, the safety out of Kansas. Just a big, long, physical, defensive back, and those guys are kind of hard to come by. If he comes in ready to play, and he kind of shows what they need to show. Miami has been very open to playing freshmen, especially on defense. OJ Frederic, freshman All-American on the back end. Bryce Fitzgerald, I mean, I guess he's not really a freshman All-American, but he should be a freshman
Yep.
All-American. 4 interceptions this season. So playing at a really, really high level as a true freshman. You had Ruben Bain, who was a freshman All-American. So it's fair to assume someone on the defensive side is going to have a really good year as a freshman. I think JJ Dunnigan is kind of like a sneaky good candidate to be a guy to kind of come in and potentially make an early impact too.
Well, Gabby, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming
Yeah.
on. This has been, great talking with you just about the preview as well as what to expect for next year. That'll just about do it for today's show. Saturday isn't just another game on the schedule, right? It's the biggest moment Miami football has stepped into over the last 2 decades, and we've covered this matchup pretty much at every angle now, and all that's left is to wait. So, huge thanks to you, Gabby, for coming on, and we'll be back next week for hopefully to break down a monumental win, and if not, the
Yep.
tragic aftermath. So until then, thank you to our listeners for tapping in once again. And as always, go Canes. See you next time.